Hello everyone, so we are on chapter number 1, fundamentals of testing. In the last video we saw module 1.3, which were 7 principles of testing. So in the next module, that is module 1.4, we are going to cover on the test activities, test wares, then value of maintaining traceability and the different roles of testing. So let's get started. So in this module we can see there are 5 submodules again. First one is test activities, second one is context of testing, which we even saw some part in the principles of testing as well. Then the testware that supports test activities, value of maintaining traceability and the different roles in testing. So let's get started. So the first module 1.4.1 focuses on different test activities and related tasks. But before that, what are test activities? Basically, there are some test objectives that need to be attained. So a combination of procedures that satisfies the test objectives are nothing but test activities. We said that there is no universally single approach to testing, but there are some standard procedures which are used most of the times. So basically test activities are the generalized set of procedures that satisfy test objectives. So let's get started with the test activities and the related tasks. Okay, so test planning. Test planning means defining test objectives and then evaluating what approach can satisfy those test objectives. So the first activity is test monitoring and test control. So it involves the checking or monitoring of the activities if they are on track or if expected results are actually aligning with the actual results. Test control involves checking the necessary actions to make up the test objectives. Now, one way to provide the test progress is by defining the exit criteria, which is nothing but definition of done in agile development. What is definition of done? Means you define certain criteria that needs to be met in order to define the end of the task or end of the test activity. Okay, so the exit criteria or end criteria will include, you will check the actual results based on the logs, okay, and you will check if the expected results and actual results are aligning. You will also assess the system quality based on the test results, and the third one is you will assess product risks and determine if more number of tests are to be performed to reduce these risks. Okay, all of this will be evaluated on based on test results. Okay, so this was the first activity, test monitoring and test control. Now here comes the second one, test analysis. It answers the question what to test. Okay, based on you have to analyze the test basis. Test basis is nothing but the knowledge or the requirement specifications in order to identify the testable features. So this is why the static analysis is important. Basically you have to study the requirement specifications and you have to identify the test scenarios or testable features. Test conditions are defined and prioritized based on the risk level. So this part we already saw in the principles of testing, that what to test exactly. You cannot test everything, right? Exhaustive testing is impossible. So in order to define what to test, you need to decide the test priority and risk levels. That is nothing but test planning. The test basis and test objects are evaluated to identify the defects. So static and dynamic analysis are done to identify the defects, and test techniques can be defined accordingly. Okay, so let's go to next test activity, that is test design. It basically answers the question how to test. So once you figure out what to test, now it is your part to prepare the environment which is required for the testing. Or once you identify the testable features, now you have to convert them into test cases. Test cases is basically one, it will define the test objective of that test scenario. Then secondly, it will have the test steps to perform the test. Thirdly, it will have the expected results, and the fourth part, it will have the actual result. That is nothing but a test case. So once you have to now define test case and test charters. Once that is defined, you have to identify the test environment that will be required to perform the test. Then you have test case requirements you have to analyze that, and based on that you have to form the test environment. The last thing you have to do is form a bi-directional traceability matrix. Now why that is important, we will come to it in a couple of minutes, but traceability matrix is nothing but once you have identified the feature, it should be traced directly to the test case that you are forming, or once you have the requirement specification, then you have to trace it to the testable feature that you have figured out. But it should be bi-directional. That means from the testable feature you should be able to trace back the requirement specification. Okay, so this is nothing but the test design that answers how to test. Now once you have identified the environment, once you have prepared the test cases, now it's the time for test implementation. In test implementation you have to include necessary testware for test execution. So what exactly you will need, you have to get the licenses for the test environment or any software that you are identifying for executing the tests. Here the test cases will be merged into test procedures, and test procedures will be merged to form test suites. Here you will be grouping the similar test cases into procedures or test packs, and then the test packs will be then merged into test suites. And you will have to, now once that is done, you have to identify the priority of the test packs, and as I said, test environment is built and set up. The next part is execution. Once that is done, now you have to run the test. Test execution can be manual or can be automated. It can be a continuous testing or paired testing. Now in the test execution itself, at the end, actual results are analyzed and they are compared with expected results. Now here you will find defects. After you find the defects, you will log them and then connect with the developers in case they have any queries regarding the defects. Then the defects get fixed. Now test completion, it occurs at the end of project cycle or end of iteration. Here basically the unresolved defects are carried forward. So for carrying it forward, you make it a part of the next product backlog or change request. Any test cases are useful testware. So the environment that you had set up earlier or the software that you had set up, it is handed over to the other team in case you don't need it anymore. Okay, or it is kept or shut down, and then once you start the next iteration cycle, you will then able to use it. Then the completion report is created and then communicated to stakeholders. In that completion report you will have everything, the actual results versus expected results, what defects did you log, what were the outcome of this root cause analysis of the defects, okay, which defects were fixed, which defects were carried forward, if they were carried forward, what change requests were created, or what was the product backlog. Everything will be a part of test completion. So this marks the end of 1.4.1 module, okay, which was test activities and the tests were related to it. Now moving forward to the next slide, we have 1.4.2, explain the impact of context on test process. Now context, as we saw earlier, context is basis on how to test and what to test. Okay, so the way testing is carried out will be dependent on a lot of factors, stakeholders like their expectations, requirement, then you have team members, their skills, knowledge, level of experience, okay, then the technical factors, software types, product architecture, business domain, what is the exact business domain, what is the business impact of testing, project constraints, cognitive factors. Okay, this all basically helps to figure out what level of testing you have to carry or what is the context of testing. So here we have to make note of coverage, which is a very important term. I think we have covered it up in the previous modules. You can take it as a revision. So the degree to which you are covering up all the test scenarios is nothing but coverage. Coverage also has to be bidirectionally traceable. Coverage needs to be traced to the test features. Now testable features needs to be traced back to the requirement specifications. Likewise, So each and everything in this loop needs to be traceable. Okay. Coverage also acts as a key performance indicator, which is in a way indirect measure of how much test objectives are achieved. Now comes the next module 1.4.3, differentiate the testware that supports test activities. Testware is created as an output work product from the test activity. Every test activity will be having an expected output. That is nothing but testware. Testware will be different for different test activities. Let us see them one by one. So the test planning work products. We will now think logically. What will be the output? For test planning, what we saw earlier was we will be defining what we need to test. Okay, so test plan, test schedule, risk register, entry criteria, exit criteria, everything will be a part of test planning. Risk register is basically list of risk items. What is the level of risk, impact, and mitigation on how to address the risk or how to reduce the risk. Okay. Now the second part is test monitoring and test control. For test monitoring, you will have actual results versus expected results, the progress reports, documentation of control directives, should address project management concerns such as budget, etc. everything. So basically we saw earlier that as a part of test monitoring, you are also assessing the level of risk that needs to be addressed. So how much tests you need to perform more to reduce the risk. So that will also define what will be the budget and what is the test completion. Okay, resource allocation, everything will be determined based on risk. That is the outcome of test monitoring and test control. Moving ahead to the next slide, test analysis work products. So we saw earlier test analysis is nothing but test planning. So here you will have the test basis. In the test basis, you will have the defect reports of previous tests, the acceptance criteria, prioritized test conditions. Okay, test design work products. Here you will form test cases out of those testable features. So the list of test cases is an outcome. Then the test charters, coverage items, test data requirements, environment requirements. Okay, as a part of implementation, you will have the environment ready at the end. Okay, then you will have the test cases converted into test procedures and test procedures. Okay, then you have the schedule of test environment items. As a part of execution, you will have the logs, defect reports, test reports, and as a part of test completion work products, you will have the completion reports, you will have the product backlog, you will have many other factors like improvements of next retrospective reports, product backlog items, CRs, everything will be documented. All the reports will be a outcome of test completion. Moving on to next module 1.4.4, we have to explain the value of maintaining traceability. So basically for effective test monitoring and control, it is important to have bidirectional traceability between test bases and testware. So basically you will have to have the traceability between requirement specification to testable feature, from testable feature to test case, from test case to test pack to test suite, etc. everything. Accurate traceability supports coverage evaluation. This is how you will actually evaluate if all test case scenarios are covered or not. Okay, this is what I just explained. Actually, one more thing, that traceability is very important, because see, stakeholders and everybody whom we are informing about the test results or test progress, they will not be aware of the technical terms, right? So if they have the traceability, the test requirements are written in a layman terms, etc. The test cases, if they have traceability, it will be very easy for them to track. Okay, this is the test case number 1. It is tracking back to, or it is covering this requirement specification. So in this term, it makes it easy, to communicate technical aspects in layman terms to the stakeholders. So this is the importance of having bidirectional traceability. Moving on to the next slide, we have 1.4.5 module, which is the last module of this. Compare the different roles in testing. So in testing, you have majorly 2 roles, test management role and testing role. Now we saw there were around 6 to 7 test activities, right? So we will divide now all those test activities into these two roles. So test management role is, as the name itself says, it is more of managing the tests. So what all will come here is test monitor and control, test analysis, test planning, then you will have the completion. Okay, in this the management will be required. So there will be a test process, test team, leadership, test activities. Now cross-functional testing may be taken up by test management role, because since they are managing, it will be easy for them, to communicate cross-functionally across the team. Now there is a testing role which covers the technical or engineering aspect of testing. In that you will have the test analysis, test design, implementation and execution. Okay. So this was a very easy module. It is basically segregating your test activities into two generalized roles, which was test management, managing the test, and the second one was testing, actual testing or the technical or engineering aspect of testing. Okay. So this marks the end of module 1.4. Okay. Now moving on, we will be having the summary of what we just learned. So first part was module 1.4.1, which was identifying the test activities. Test activities had test monitor and control, then test analysis, test test design, test implementation, test execution, and then test completion. All of these activities have some specific outcomes, which is nothing but testware. Now for test monitoring and control, the testware will be the risks identified or the testable or the progress reports, okay, actual versus expected. Then the second part is test analysis. For test analysis, the outcome will be the identified testable features. Then you will have the defect reports of previous tests, etc. Now the third part is test design. Test design outcome will be identification of environment, identification of test cases. The test cases will be ready as a part of test design. Then you have test implementation. As the outcome of test implementation, you will have the test suites or test procedures, a schedule of how to execute the test, environment will be ready, the software will be ready, everything will be ready as a part of test implementation. Then you have test execution. As a part of as the outcome of test execution, you will have the reports, defect reports, etc. Then comes the last part, which was test completion. As a outcome of test completion, you will be having the list of the remaining or unsolved defects. Unresolved defects will be then formed as a part of CR changes. There is change request, or you will have the product backlog item. Okay. Then as an outcome of it, you will be shutting down the environment or handing it over to some other team. Similarly, you will be handing over the rest software, etc. for the next iteration cycle. So that is the outcome of the last test activity. So we covered all the testware. Okay, this slide is also the same. Impact of context on the test process. So impact basis, context defines what to test and how to test. So that will be dependent on a number of factors, project factors, like what is the stakeholders, what is the business domain, what is the requirement, how people are in your team, what are their skills, okay, what are their goals, etc. So there will be a lot of factors, domain factors, regulatory requirements, organizational culture. It will depend on a lot of things. Okay. Then we have value of maintaining the traceability. Here basically we saw how to trace test basis to the testable feature to test case to test pack to test suite. So each of this should be having a reverse traceability or a bidirectional traceability. Why it is important? You have to communicate the same to the stakeholders. For them, communicating the technical aspects in layman terms is very important. So this marks the end of 1.4 module. So if you like the content, please subscribe and make sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notification of every new video I post. I will be dividing the revision video of this modules into 5 parts on Instagram, and I will be posting them soon. Make sure you follow me on Instagram also. and I will be providing cheat sheet of this module on LinkedIn. Okay, so if you have any doubts, you can message me in YouTube community, you can join it, or you can email me, okay, or you can connect me on Instagram. Thank you.